As you can see, Buster's here to help me today. He likes to be in here and just cause trouble when I'm working on the radios and when Fred's asleep. See, Fred keeps Buster busy most of the time. But during the middle part of the day, on the weekends when I'm home, I notice that that's when Buster comes around and pesters me, because Fred sleeps a lot more than Buster does. And when Fred isn't around to keep Buster busy, he comes and bugs me. What you doing, Buster? Yeah. Alright, I get it. Oh, you're a good kitty. Alright, Buster, I have work to do. Come on, bud. Come on, I have work to do. Come on, down you go. Down you go. Let's see, who really owns this chair? Me or you, Buster? Well, this time it's going to be me. Come on, buddy. I don't think I really own the chair, because I'm not winning this. I've got a cartridge. There's a Phonsteel P226 set up with 278 RPM needles. This is something I get from Voice and Music audio enthusiasts. And what I want to do here, I'm going to get this clip off first. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tape this little guard on here so I don't make a mistake and damage the needle. I just use a little bit of tape. It doesn't hurt it. Alright, and then I just wrap it around the guard. When I am ready to take that guard off, that's the only time it's going to come off, see? Make a little flap. Alright, now that guard's going to stay in place so I can't damage that stylus while I'm working on it. So this is a stereo cartridge, but I want to generate a mono signal. According to Gary on the Voice of Music, the best way to do that is to tie the two negative pins together. You really don't want to be soldering on these if you can help it. But I'm going to probably break all the rules here, and I'm going to put a little heat sink right at the base of this pin, and then I'm just going to really barely, because it only has to be tacked. You should try to avoid soldering on these pins. And so what I'm going to do is make what I'm going to do is make a little two connector What Gary has you do, since you're never going to play a stereo record with this, is what Gary at Voice of Music suggests in his instructions, since you're never going to play a stereo record with this, you're really not going to have any cancellation from left to right channel. They're going to be exactly the same thing. So the best thing to do is to tie both pins for left and right together, okay, both the positive and the negative, okay, and then you just take a wire off of one of the positives and one of the negatives, and that'll be positive and negative for the signal. All right, so first things first, I'm going to take this little kit that he sends. I'm going to make that little wire deal where I connect those pins together before I hook the signal wire up to it. Let me take all the pieces of the kit that don't matter right now and set them aside. He sends a lot of little pieces with the kit. You wind up using just a small number of them, but you never know which ones you're going to use, so it's a good thing he sends them. Different size, different length screws, different thread pitch, different thread screws. What I want right now are these 4 little terminals, okay? Let me hold one up for you. These are tiny. You're going to have to get used to working with small parts if you're going to work with record players. There is the terminal right there. It's very small. Alright guys, all these different components that are sent with the kit are really cool, but I actually find it really difficult to try to use this wire, and sometimes these clips can be a bugger too. I started to try and do the stuff I needed to with this wire, and it was just too fine for me to work with. But in any event, I tried it, and I spent a lot of time on it, and it just didn't go well. So I'm just gonna skip that and tell you that if you can make this fine wire work, hey, good for you. I struggle with it, and so I had a different idea, and I'll show you what that is rather than waste a bunch of video time on a big fail. All right, hang on to your civvies out there, all you purists, because I'm about to commit sacrilege. What you see me doing right now is actually soldering to the terminal post on a cartridge. That's usually a big no-no, and I certainly don't recommend that you do this, but I had just about given up. So I put a heat sink on the thing, and I just tacked the wires that go from the left and the right channels for both positive and negative, tacked them on there together so that I can then solder the signal wires to the little jumpers that I just tacked on. No, your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. That's actually twist tie material that I'm using here. Turns out it works really great as phonograph signal hookup wire. Go figure. All right, let's do a little recap, shall we? I got pretty tired of trying to work with that fine wire and these little clips. These little clips are fragile. I think they're made of aluminum. They bend easily, they break easily, and they don't go on to the cartridge pins very easily. And so what I did instead is I had some spare new ones around, and I slipped 4 clips on, and I did the unthinkable. Okay, you phono guys out there will just be cringing. I went ahead and I put the clips on, not quite all the way, but close, so they didn't transfer as much heat. And I put a heat sink, this little guy right here, as I did each one, I put a heat sink on the pin so that any heat that transferred from the clip to the pin, a lot of it got captured by this heat sink. So I did my best to protect the cartridge, but that fine wire is also hard to solder to, and it about drove me nuts. And so what I did, you're going to think it's crazy, but it worked. Most twist ties are made with steel wire, and they're tinned. But if you take a magnet, it's hard to see, but you might be able to see this. That is steel wire, okay? Well, steel wire that's been tinned like this works just fine as conductor for things like this, and it's just the right size, and it's stronger than that wire that came with the kit. And I ran it through the holes in these new clips, looped it around once, ran it to the other side, looped it around once, and then soldered it to the clips with that arrangement with the heat sink that I pointed out. Alright, so I did that for each side. For the negative, here are the negatives, and then here's the positive. And I just took a piece of shrink tubing, put it on each one so I know which one is which, and that'll be that, okay? I'm as patient as just about anybody else, but there's only so much I can take when it comes to fussing around with wire that I know is going to break after I spend all day getting it together, and then when I set this thing up, that dang wire's going to break on me anyway. Let me set it aside, and I'll show you what I did with the head shell. As I mentioned, I was concerned about not getting enough tracking force on this to enable this thing to play and operate properly as a changer without skipping or jumping around. I ran into that when I did a 46-1209 not long ago, and I thought I was doing the right thing by making it as light as possible, and I got it down to about 4 grams with that cartridge. The problem was that the changer mechanism wouldn't operate correctly, and it wouldn't lower, and if it did lower, it would skip a lot. So that wasn't going to work. So I find myself having to go to the top end of the tracking force limits on this cartridge. And in order to do that, because there's a big spring holding that Tonearm up, you have to overcome that spring. I took some weights and I put them inside the head shell. There's plenty of room for that. These weights, you probably won't be able to get these, but these weights are nothing more than cylinder head washers for the old 36 horsepower engines for Volkswagens. So these are nice and thick. They have fairly small holes, so there's a lot of weight in each one of them, so it didn't take many. But you're going to do what you have to do. I put a piece of wood in here, and why did I do that? Well, this wood is easy to work with. I could glue it in place. It's not going to come out, but if I ever do need to get it out, I can. And this glue is going to be the mounting point for the clip for this cartridge, okay? Now, this cartridge I couldn't mount down in the floor of this thing, partly because of these weights, but partly because the stylus wouldn't stick out beyond the bottom of the head shell, and I don't want this to look any different from the outside. So I don't want to drill any holes or anything like that. So this wood provides a nice mounting location for the clip for that cartridge. And then all I'm going to do is secure it in place with these little brass wood screws. I'll take an awl and I'll punch some pilot holes, and I'll take a drop of super glue, put it in each of the holes, and that will secure the screws so they don't come loose, and that'll hold this clip on. Yet if I ever need to get those screws out, I should be able to. So that's my plan. Now this clip is bent in such a way that it actually, once it comes into contact with this washer. So I need to do one more thing, and that is to put some little shims there so that when this clip sits on here, it's not touching that washer, okay? That will be a way to, if it's touching the washer, it may transmit noise. It may not just fit on the cartridge right. I mean, you know, I just need to think about that stuff. So now the way I'm doing it makes it fairly easy to get this pretty well aligned. Now remember, this is a 78 player. Alignment, we're not talking about a hi-fi stereo, okay? We're not working on your favorite Lynn Sondek. What we're doing here is just trying to make sure that this 78 cartridge is pretty well lined up. So that's why I like this piece of wood. It's pretty easy for me to see if it's lined up. And then I'm just going to take an awl, poke a hole right here. Okay, that'll be my pilot hole. Pretty simple. I mean, we're talking low-tech stuff, guys. All right, and you see this little screw hole here, that enables me to align this too. So, all right, so I got this right here. One more screw hole. All right, so now we have some pilot holes. Looking great, eh? Now let's take a screw and let's just run it down a hole and kind of get it started, making sure it's going to thread in properly, all right? Real simple stuff. Doesn't take a genius to figure this one out, so that's a good thing, because I wouldn't be able to figure it out. Well, I need somebody smarter than me, apparently. I already tried the grabber screwdriver on these screws and they slip off of it. Run that down a little bit, just a little bit, just to get it started, okay? So that when I go to put it together, it's not impossible. Same thing with this guy here. This is bass wood, by the way, fairly soft wood, hence the glue. This wood will you know, easily relax around that screw and not hold it tight after a while. So that's why I need the glue. So I'm going to take some super glue. I'll put a little drop on each one, and I'll put a drop on the threads too. A little drop on each one. Okay. And you know about super glue, you want to keep your fingers away from super glue. So I use this tool. Super glue is already soaking into the wood, so that's pretty cool. Now I'm going to put one in first, just to get it started, and then I'll show you what I do. Okay, so now that's started. Now I'm going to take the clip and lay it down there, and then I'll do the other one after that. But let me go down a little further with that. Put a little drop of super glue on those threads. This wood soaks up the super glue like water, man. All right, now let's lay that down there. We'll take the clip, set it on there, and and then start with the other screw. A little drop of super glue on those threads. We want those things to stay in there. It's pretty well centered on this hole here and on the hole in the washers. And the washers are pretty well centered inside the head shell. So I think this is going to be as aligned as I can, and certainly as aligned as it needs to be for a 78 player. Now I'm going to leave this piece of tape on here, and when I go to pull this off, that piece of tape will probably stay there, probably tear, and that piece will stay on the bottom, won't hurt a thing. Okay, I want to keep that little guard on there. Alright, so on here there's a little tang. Let me see if you can see that. See that there's a little tab right there, okay? That fits into a little opening here in the back of the clip. Alright, there's a little opening here in the back of the clip. So this little tab, alright, goes in to that little slot. Alright, and you have to, there we go, you have to kind of wiggle it a bit to get it there. I'm going to have to do something here that I just saw. I'm glad I saw it. These here maybe will want to touch that washer. So I'll try to do what I can to bend them up just a little bit, but that won't be enough. Yeah, just in case, I'm going to put a little bit of liquid tape on that washer there. I'll take a little heat and dry it some. Let's dry this up a little bit. That's enough to get it started, just so it doesn't ooze everywhere. Yep, that's going to work fine. Also, just for good measure, put a little bit of liquid tape right here on this wire. I won't do much heating there because I don't want to heat that cartridge. At that point I have to say enough is enough. Maybe I'll touch it with a little heat just to put a skin on it. It should be enough. I should be able to get that in there without that touching the washer. There we go. Perfect. Now, once you got that tab engaged, okay, all you do is push it home to engage that little clip. And you be careful, these are brittle, these break really easily. So nice and easy, there you go. Okay, that's all there is to it. I will remove this tape when the time comes, and it, like I said, it'll leave a little bit of tape right up under here. I really don't care. We have the cartridge. It sits really, it looks really high to you. But what you're looking at partly is that needle guard, okay? Here's the stylus right here. There's about a centimeter between the bottom of the head shell and that stylus. This should sit pretty level. I'm not terribly concerned about it. So now if I need to add more weight, I can always put a screw there. I can put another washer right in here. I don't think I'm going to need to. I could also put screws in these holes here to add tiny bits of weight if I need to. Actually, I can't put a screw there. This is how I'm going to hold this to the Tonearm. Now, when I attach the signal wires to these, they're going to attach right down in here, and then I'll put a piece of string tubing, and one will sit on either side of this little screw pedestal here, and that should be just fine. Okay, the next step is to feed this 2-conductor shielded signal cable out to the Tonearm, and the way you do that is you go in right here at the very bottom of the pivot of the Tonearm, right here. This pivot shaft is hollow, and you just sort of poke it in there, and it's big enough it'll allow it through, and you just push it through, and you see it'll just come right out through here, and you just reach in there and grab a hold of it and kind of help it feed through. All right, we will worry about just how much of it needs to feed through once we get it where we need it to be. Alright, and so you're kind of pulling it out of this little opening here. And then you've got to attach it right in here and go along the full length, go along the length of the Tonearm until you come out up here. And then of course the head shell is going to attach here. So there's going to be places in the Tonearm that we have to attach this. So let's get this turntable set up so that we can do that. Alright, so what we really have to try and do here is find a logical way to feed this, and it's really hard to do with the where you can see it, guys, so I'm going to do my best. Okay, basically I want to feed this thing in through here so that it stays in place. There's a little clip there, you can see it, and I want to keep that in place. I have to tell you, it was a heck of a lot easier to pull this thing out than it is to get it put back in. That's for sure. Well, hell, that's not going to work. This is going to drive me up a wall. So let's see if we can get this clip off of here. Well, I think I may have found the answer, guys. Look at that. If you look closely at this Tonearm, you see there's a screw. I thought this was just a roll pin that was shoved in there. It's not. This is nice. This is something to remember down the road with these Philco changers. There's a screw in there that's used for the pivot. That's sort of a gimbal pivot. But the thing is, that screw is secured with a set screw so it doesn't come loose. And this is the part I didn't catch. There's the part I didn't see all along, was that set screw. You got to loosen that set screw, and then you can loosen that screw. And this thing just sort of falls off in your hand when you do that. Let me show you what this set screw looks like. See, it's just a little gimbal pivot, and I'll be able to clean that up, and I'll even be able to put a touch of grease on that, just a tiny touch, to make sure that that works real well. But look at that. See that? Piece of cake, man. I had no idea this was this easy. Well, then I don't really need to fool around with this table in the way while I'm setting up this Tonearm and head shell. So let me go ahead and take that out. So you look, there is that little set screw pivot, okay? You can see the screwdriver, the flathead screwdriver slot in there. And that is basically nothing more than like a gimbal pivot. Okay, you loosen that bugger, and that comes out, and this thing will fall right off in your hand. And that's real nice. Now, it was turning real hard at first, and that's because it is secured by this little set screw. Okay, once I realized that and I loosened that set screw, well, then that bugger just slipped right out of there with my fingertips. So that's real nice. So I could take this Tonearm right out and work on it separately and set it aside from the base. Now, if you look at this right here, you can see this is how, there is the little hole, the little opening or gap or whatever you want to call it, the well, where that little pivot point rides in. And then on this side over here will be the other half of that pivot. Now, the side that screws in is this side right up here. Now, what this enables me to do is not only clean this up properly and assemble this Tonearm the right way, okay, so I'll be able to do this on the bench, but that also will enable me to clean all this up here and make sure that that's going to work properly for good. I'll maybe put a little oil in there, just a tiny bit, and I'll maybe put a little tiny smear of grease in each side of this pivot, and that will help that to work better. So you learn something new every day. I've been working on these Philco record changers for a couple of years now. I've worked on 3 or 4 of them. And I never caught that. Every time I always just assumed it was a roll pin and never looked closely enough to notice that it was a screwdriver. Oh well, you learn something new every day. Alright guys, I'm going to try this again now, see if we can't do this with this on the bench. So this should be a lot easier now. There we go. So far so good, eh? Okie dokie. Now I can adjust this length once I get that head shell mounted, which is what I'm going to do right now. Okay. And I tell you what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to go ahead and remove this cartridge so that I don't damage it while I'm handling this. There we go. When I put down the liquid tape, I glued these terminal connectors, these terminals from the cartridge, to the washer. So now I need to break that glue if I want to take this out of here. So I'll leave this liquid tape on here. In fact, I might put a little bit more and when I put that back on, so I don't have a problem with it making contact across this washer. I'll probably put some more liquid tape on there. I'll do it right when I install it so that it doesn't harden up and then not be able to fit it easily. Okay, so this head shell, back to the head shell. There is a bit of mounting hardware that goes right here, and I need to find that. I want to keep this as light as possible, but a star washer is going to be important on this because it vibrates and moves. So let me get one of those. Okay, have a star washer. Just want to make sure I don't pinch that little signal cable. Yep, still plenty loose. Don't want to pinch that because the wires are fragile. Pull the excess cable through. Don't need excess there. And we're probably going to need all the cable we can up under the turntable. But you want to leave enough that you can work with too. So while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and strip these two wires and make them ready. I need to give myself a small length of this shielding with which to ground, because the shielding has to be grounded, and it's better if it's grounded up at the cartridge end. I'm going to clean up these little, I'm going to clean up this guy right here with a wire brush and then put some lubricant on it, and I'll clean up that one too. Just put a nice shine on it and call it good. Don't thread it in very far, and then just far enough so you can touch a little tiny bit of grease on there. Come over here, just touch the tip of that guy right there. Touch the tip of that guy right there. And then when I marry this up to that record changer, it will float nicely. By the way, this is what I'm using, guys. This I got at a thrift store, or I'm sorry, a flea market. I paid all of 50 cents for this. I imagine it's about a third done, so there's probably 15 to 20 feet on this roll, so pretty cool. Okay, so before I put this together, I want to clean this up a little bit. Just that's one of those little touches you want to make right. Grab some extra cut compound. Don't need much. And just come over here and kind of clean this up. I'm here, I might as well, eh? Basically, this whole assembly here pivots. There must be a bearing right in there. You see right there. So down in here, this acts as a nice bushing for this guy. This whole thing is turning, so it's turning inside of here. So all I really need to do to make sure that's going to be okay, that's going to have been cleaned. There won't be a lot of junk in there. All I really need to do is just get a little lubricant down in that thing and I should be okay. I don't really want to take this all apart because I don't want to do anything to change the adjustment on it. It's real hard for you to see, but right in there is a little pivot that it rides on. And if I get a few drops of oil in there, I should be golden. Got my Showa machine oil, the usual stuff. I'll put a couple drops on the screwdriver, as always. And just start by coming in here and just seeing how I can get, ooh, that's a little too big to fit in there. So time to use a different method. Clean that off so it doesn't make a mess. We'll try it this time with an awl. I can get in there and touch it now. Now if I touch that and I put a drop on there, it should just run right down to it. And I'll have to clean up some excess, but at least it does get the oil where I want it. And you know what? I actually feel a difference. That's nice. Okay, let me do this one more time. You just put that on there and you try not to rest it against anything because you want the oil to run down to the tips. And then you can put oil right there and it'll run down to the tip. And if you work it while you're doing it, it does get, a lot of oil gets in places you don't want it to get, but some oil gets where you do want it to get. So that's perfect. Okay, now, most important part, clean off the excess oil because that will cause stuff to stick to it and it'll make it nasty. So right in here is another spot that I can get to. If I can get that wet with just a little bit of oil and then tip it so the gravity be on my side, that should work out just fine. So just a little oil, let it run down to where it needs to go. You know, more oil gets where you don't need it to be than gets where you need it to be, but the point is get the oil where you want it and then you can wipe off the rest. Oh yeah, see, that's nice and smooth now. It's got some bounce to it that it didn't have before. Okay. Now this will wind up being, because I can't get grease in there, this oil will dry up probably in a year to 2 years. But this stuff I've found doesn't leave a lot of residue and it lubricates for a long time. So this will have to be redone at some point, but that was part of the, I'm sure if I look at the manual, this is a lubrication point. And the manual would say to do it every year or two. Okay, so that's going to work out really nicely. Great. Now remember, we have to run this signal cable up through this thing. You're going to push the signal cable right in through here. Okay, real easy. It goes in nice and simple. Alright. Feed that through there. And then you present the tone arm to the table. So since we are not going to worry about what's underneath for right now, let me show you from the top side what we're doing. So we're going to bring this down here. Remember these two pivot points, and the screw side faces the outboard side of the turntable. But you want to first get that inboard side in place, and then you come up here and you turn this screw until you start to feel it meshing, and then it'll sort of self-center, and you don't want to over tighten it. You want this thing to not have play but to be able to move freely. And they can be tricky because you can over tighten them, and you don't want to screw it in tight before you know you're in the spot where it needs to be, okay? Because you can damage the tip and then it won't be a very good bearing surface. There we go. Sometimes it helps to try and get that one in the hole and turn it a little bit, and you just keep working back and forth. Now remember, when we started, this screw was not proud of the surface at all of this tone arm, so that's good. When it goes all the way in and it's a little bit below the surface of the tone arm, material, then you know you're in good shape. But you do not want to over tighten it. That's why they put a set screw there, by the way, so you're not tempted to tighten this thing real tight. Okay, you want nice, easy movement. But you don't want any play. And then once you have that, then you tighten that screw down, this set screw down here. And that should do the trick. There we go. Nice easy movement with no play. A little bit of tracking force for sure, but it's going to be needed. This is a 78 player and they require more tracking force than long playing records do. That's probably about right. It feels like about 7 grams. I put that cartridge on there, it should be alright. And then if it's too light, of course, then I can always add a couple screws to try and fine tune it. Not much I can do if it's too heavy. If it is too heavy, I can put a washer or two up here at this weight end, because the pivot is inboard of the weight end, and a little weight in here will actually make this end lighter. So I'll tinker with it, but first I've got to measure it. My biggest worry is that this will skip if it's not heavy enough. When it's playing, it'll skip. There we go. We just tripped the reject. I'll have to adjust that too, by the way, but I have to have that in place to do it. Alright, so let's put it on manual for now, and we'll just set it over here. Okay, so I'm going to take a little piece of painter's tape, and I don't want to leave residue on this Tonearm, so I'll put that up there. I'm not going to worry about it on the pedestal too much, but up here it's front and center. I don't really want any. There we go. That's all I need, just to keep that from flopping around. Okay guys, it is finally time to install the idler wheel on this guy. I got the idler wheel back from Gary at Voice and Music Audio Enthusiasts. The idler wheel for this machine, just in case, is a Philco number, and it shows on his website as Philco number 56-2882. 56-2882. Now Gary doesn't stock this drive wheels, this idler wheel, so what you have to do is take yours off and send it to him. Now mine was the original part, and so you can see that part number. So you can see the part number right here, 56-2882. It's a real simple but small, fairly small idler wheel. It's about 2 inches in diameter, maybe a little less. Alright, so I'm going to set that there. I'll go ahead and pull this little, I always put the clip on the post, so I'll put that right there. Now there are a couple of shims, and there was one shim on top and one shim underneath the idler wheel. So let's go ahead and separate these two shims. Now this particular, that shim has been damaged, so I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. I'll show you what I use. I get these shims also from Voice and Music, and I happen to have one out of the bag. And I'm just going to go ahead and put this shim on there after I mount the idler wheel. Now let me just one last time clean that shaft, and then I will put the very smallest, I mean smallest amount of sewing machine grease on the shaft, because it will need some lubrication, but it needs very little, okay? So let's not get excited, because we're going to be putting lubrication right next to where the idler wheel friction surface is, and by definition a friction surface should not be lubricated. So you don't want grease, see there is some dirt on there, you don't want grease to get up on that idler wheel friction surface at all, okay, at all. Let us do this. I mean, very, very tiny amount, okay? We're talking, look at that. Tiny, tiny amount, alright? And what I do is I put that dollop on there and I spread it with my finger, which makes it even thinner, okay? And then I will put a similarly small amount inside the idler wheel on the bottom side. This idler wheel has two different dimensions for the hub. You want this dimension here is the bigger of the two. It's bigger than this one here. This dimension, this side here, goes down. Now I'm going to drop the idler wheel, and I cleaned the motor drive shaft. Drop the idler wheel on here. Alright, and if I push it away from the motor shaft, you can see it should spin okay. Yep, spinning fine. I'm going to drop this shim down on top of there now. Alright, and then I'll just go ahead and put that clip on, and I should be in like Flynn, man. And there we go. Alright, so we have ourselves an idler wheel, and the only thing really left on this to check it out, to test it, is to drop the platter on there. It will not run without the platter, because the platter is what drives this gear right here, and this gear drives the whole changer mechanism. So in order to put the platter on, I've got to clean this center bearing right here, this spindle bearing. Alright, so I can just clean that and leave that in place. I don't need to pull that out. It's real easy to clean. There's not much to these. It's just a simple little ball bearing. It's got a top race and a bottom race and a ball bearing in between. So I'll just clean that guy. We're going to have to clean this platter, this stuff here. No big deal. It's not really very dirty. Basically, you see this little gear here on the platter. Okay, this little gear is what drives this guy right here. Okay, that gear, and then this little bearing here is the bearing that sits right down here and enables it to spin freely. The open side, okay, is going to face down on the turntable. Okay, and we'll go ahead and put this little race on in there as well, and we'll let that soak for a few minutes in some lacquer thinner. The flocking on this little platter is beautiful, so I don't have to do anything there. Sometimes I've had to fix the flocking up. A lot of times there'll be big chunks flaking off. This is not bad, and if you can leave it alone, it's better to do that. Now I'm going to advise the owner to put some cork, like you do on a modern turntable, on here, and run it with cork so that he's not tearing up the flocking, and it'll be easier on his records. Be easier on everything. I want to be careful of the paint on this, even though it's not really visible when it's running. Still, you don't want to tear it up. So you just clean that gear out. It's a nice little gear. This gear is in really good shape. Not that you don't have to do anything fancy with this. It's real easy to get to if you need to get in there and clean it again later. This is a plastic gear. You don't need lubricant on this. You put oil and grease on this, and it's just going to get cruddy, and it's going to make a mess. So just leave that unlubricated. It does not need lubricant. Now let's check on that bearing. Alright, so let's just get in there and scrub a dub on this bearing just with a little toothbrush. It's no big deal. Basically, you're just knocking that grease out of there. It's real easy to get out. You just have to keep at it. I should be wearing gloves while I work with this lacquer thinner, but I'm so used to it, it doesn't even faze me anymore. You, on the other hand, should use gloves. You can tell by the sound that this thing is clean. Listen to this. You can kind of hear the balls moving around. Anyway, that tells me that's clean. I'll set that aside to dry. Let me get that little washer out of there, or top bearing race, or whatever you want to call it. Now when you look at these, you can see that there is one side that the bearing has really never run in. The other side, the bearing does run in all the time. That's the side, of course, that you want to have face the bearing, because it's already got a wear pattern set up, and you don't need to put excess wear on that bearing, on those little balls, by trying to set up a new wear pattern. Alright, I'm going to take a screwdriver and just touch a little bit of grease on that this bottom bearing surface here. Remember, don't get too excited or you'll be wiping a lot of grease off. You're going to pack some grease in that ball bearing though. Alright, here's a critical part. You've got this ball bearing. You want to make sure that each of those little balls has plenty of access to grease. So this is the one part where you put a lot of grease on. You take the platter, you set the platter up here where you can get to it. You take this top bearing race, drop it down there onto the spindle shaft, okay? And then you're going to take this bearing, slide it onto the spindle shaft. Okay, now it's ready. Now you've got a little excess grease here on the spindle shaft. No big deal, you're just going to wipe it off. You don't want excess grease anywhere. You don't want to have it be dry either. Make sure your hands are clean when you handle this next step. So if you have to go wash your hands, I'm going to do a big no-no and just wipe mine with some lacquer thinner. I'm going to get them clean. You do what you want. I don't advise you doing this, but I think I'm too old for it to cause me cancer anyway, and I don't live in the state of California, so it's only cancer causing in the state of California, so I'm not worried about it. Alright, go ahead and drop this now. What holds it in is a screw engages right here in this part of the shaft, okay? And you can see there's a little witness mark right there. That's how I'll know what angle it goes. I'm glad I remembered that. So I'm going to go ahead and tip this turntable on its side as I prepare to put that platter on. There's this screw, this bolt down here. Okay, I'm going to leave that loose. That is a set screw. Let me show you what it looks like. You see that has a little ball point on it, okay? And that ball point is what made that witness mark there. And I'm going to get that ball point back into that little witness mark, and that's how I'll know this thing is oriented correctly. And then where that witness mark is, I'm going to put a little dot right here on the end of this shaft. That will kind of orient me. There. Now I'll know that's the side that needs to face that little bolt. There we go. Orient that toward that screw. And I kind of wiggle it around until I find the right spot. Something like that. Here we go. Okay, let's take the tape off of this guy and let's give this a try and just see what happens if I operate it by hand. Okay. Well, right now it's in manual. Let's put it to automatic. Something's not right there. I'll have to check that out, why it shoots over like that. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put some juice to this thing just to see if it turns okay and operates the way it's supposed to. So I'll just put some power to the motor right here through this deal here. Remember, I've got an on-off switch right there. Okay, got it plugged. Now it's plugged in. Let me see what happens. Check that out, guys. There we go. So first little test is done. The motor is turning. It's a big deal. I can't tell you how many I've done that that wasn't the case. Alright, now let's try this. So presumably you would come over and you'd put this on manual, and then you'd put it on automatic, and there we go. Okay, so far so good, guys. It comes over here and you can hear that that little reject pawl is engaging. It won't do anything until you get to the end of the record, and you remember the lead out groove of a 78 has the needle kind of going back and forth like that. It gets to the lead out groove, and lead out groove will lead that tone arm back and forth. That moving back and forth is what causes the reject to trip on these old machines. See, it will go all the way to the end. Okay, but as soon as it moves back, that's when it trips the reject. I'm going to try this. Put it on manual. See, that doesn't reject. There's not. It'll just sit there and ride that lead out groove of the record all day long. Okay, guys, first test is done. We got the motor operating. We got the changer mechanism working. Now I can clean that up. I didn't know what I was going to have to do with that guy, so now I know. I can clean that up, and I can go ahead and mount this cartridge and see if we get an output. Time to slip this cartridge in and get her hooked up. I've been watching Larry, Back to the Future radios, work on that RCA Super Red R7, which is a radio I've never seen or worked on before. And I've been pretty intrigued. He did a really nice job on that radio. I mean, nice. And he showed me some things. Some of the things, the way he did them, were things I want to adopt. The way he did a nice job with running the wires through when he mounted the cans and the transformers and so forth. Did high quality work. You could tell he was in an industry where quality mattered when he was working. And I know he was in nuclear power, and I know about nuclear power because I used to be in nuclear power a long time ago. Well, anyway, Larry did a really nice job on that radio, and he did not have the alignment instructions. Well, I just happened to be a member of Radio Museum, and Radio Museum had a full set of alignment instructions for that radio. So I downloaded them and sent him a copy. And he's finished with the radio, but Larry said in his response to me, wherever that radio goes, those instructions ought to go with it. Pretty cool radio. I'd like to look for one myself, but I don't think they're all that common. Alright, so we'll go ahead and mount this back onto the clip now. The quality of the video was really bad here, guys. There wasn't much to see. Basically connected the red wire to the red wire and the black wire to the black wire and hooked the ground up under that screw. So that's why I cut most of that video out, because it went on for a long time and it was really dull. So let's just show you the finished product. I got the cartridge mounted here. Now let's make it so we can connect a signal up to this thing, okay? I'm installing an RCA plug on the end of the signal wire for this record player, and I will just plug it right into the RCA receptacle. Here is the RCA receptacle. I don't necessarily need to mount that anywhere. This is the place where I fed about 3/4 of a volt of audio signal into and got plenty of sound out of the radio, so I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be fine with the record changer and that ceramic cartridge feeding this thing. The correct layout or pinout for this is the black wire, which is the sort of negative of the ceramic cartridge, goes to the sleeve of this RCA jack, which then goes to ground in the chassis. The red wire, being the positive part of that ceramic cartridge, goes to wherever it needs to go in the chassis. Then that shield right there, I will connect to ground on the chassis to avoid ground loops and hum and so forth. So that's all there is to it. I'm going to go ahead now and take the little plastic plug cover and just go ahead and screw that on, and we'll be ready to go. Well, guys, please forgive the length of this video, but I didn't really see a logical place in which to break it all up. And so we're going to go ahead and call it good on this record changer now, and it is time finally to dive into the chassis. The next video installment you see will see me going at the chassis full bore, and we can put this record changer into the radio and hook it up after we're done with that chassis. As I mentioned, I tested it with an audio signal, so I'm pretty sure it's going to work, but we'll see just how well it works as a record changer, a functioning record changer, when we get good to go on the chassis. So, from your Western Outpost in Salt Lake City, this is Michael, along with Buster the Cat, and we'll wrap it up. That's all for now.